She sat alone at the wedding until the billionaire leaned in and said, "Let's pretend we're in love." Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. She sat alone at the wedding until the billionaire leaned in and said, "Let's pretend we're in love. When you want to get to, come in ours very god dowdy dover." The music was soft but expensive, the kind that fills the ballroom of a five-star hotel without anyone really listening. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above rows of white roses in champagne glasses. Every guest seemed paired off, laughing, whispering, belonging, everyone except her. Lila Hart sat at the corner table near the floral arch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She tried to smile, but the sound of laughter from the bride's table cut through her like glass. A single tear almost betrayed her, but she blinked it away. This was not her wedding, not her world. She was only a guest worse, a last-minute invitation sent out of pity by an old friend who barely remembered her name. Her thrift store dress did not belong here. Its navy fabric, pressed and repressed, looked dull beside sequin gowns that caught the light like oceans. Every few seconds, she caught the curious glances of guests whispering behind champagne flutes. "Who is she?" one woman murmured. "Came alone," another added, almost delighted by the cruelty. Lila pretended to check her phone. No messages, no missed calls, just silence, the kind that aches. She reached for a glass of water, her fingers trembling slightly. Somewhere across the room, the bride tossed her head back and laughed at a joke, the groom whispered. It was the kind of laugh Lila used to have, before life had pressed her into smaller, quieter spaces. Her mind wandered to the stack of unpaid bills waiting at home, the eviction notice pinned to her fridge, the camera she had pawned last week to cover her mother's medication. She had told herself she came tonight to celebrate, but really, she just wanted to feel like she still existed in someone's guest list. A shadow fell across her table. The scent of cedar and rain filled her lungs before she dared to look up. A tall man in a charcoal suit stood there, broad-shouldered, perfectly composed. His tie was slightly loosened, his expression unreadable. "People are watching," he said, eyes darting toward the curious guests nearby. "If you smile now, they will stop wondering why you are sitting alone, and if I smile back, they will stop asking why I'm still single." It was absurd. It was reckless. Yet something in his voice, steady, assured, faintly kind, cut through her humiliation. Lila glanced around. Indeed, people were watching. The thought of giving them something else to talk about almost made her laugh. She hesitated only a second longer, then whispered, "Fine. Just for tonight." The man straightened, his smile widening slightly as he extended his hand. "Adrian Cole," he said. "And you are?" "Lila," she replied softly. "Lila Hart. Rive CEO. Nice to meet you, Miss Hart," he said, taking her hand gently. "Now let us make them believe." As he led her to the dance floor, the lights dimmed and the first notes of a slow song began. Whispers rippled around them like waves, but Lila barely noticed. Adrian's hand was warm around hers, his movement steady and confident. "Relax," he murmured. "You are safe with me." Safe. The word landed deep. For months she had been fighting to survive alone, no safety, no certainty. Yet now, under the glow of chandeliers, with a stranger's hand guiding hers, she almost believed it. The song swelled. Cameras flashed. Somewhere, someone gasped. Lila realized too late that the room had stilled. The billionaire CEO, Adrian Cole, had just taken the hand of the unknown girl sitting alone. And from that moment, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The next morning, sunlight filtered through thin curtains and painted faint gold on the cracked wall of Lila's small apartment. Her heels from last night sat abandoned near the door, one strap broken, the other coated with dust from the street outside the hotel. The memories of that wedding replayed in her head like a film she was not sure she had lived. Adrian Cole, billionaire, CEO of Cole Industries, the man who had asked her to pretend they were in love. She had Googled his name after getting home and nearly dropped her phone. His face filled pages of business magazines, headlines calling him the Ice King of New York finance. It made no sense that someone like him would even look at her, let alone speak to her. She rubbed her temples and sighed. Maybe it had all been a mistake, a moment of pity from a stranger trying to fill an awkward silence at a wedding. Still, the way he had looked at her, the calm steadiness of his eyes felt too real to forget. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Meet me at the Atrium Cafe. 10 o'clock. No name, no greeting, but somehow she knew exactly who it was. 2 hours later, Lila pushed open the glass doors of the cafe. It was quiet, sleek, with light jazz playing in the background and the smell of roasted coffee beans filling the air. Adrian was already there, seated by the window, perfectly composed in a dark coat and crisp white shirt. He looked up the moment she entered, as if he had been expecting her all along. "Miss Hart," he said, rising slightly. "Thank you for coming." "I almost did not," she admitted, clutching her worn handbag. "I thought maybe you just said all that last night to save you from an awkward evening," he finished smoothly. "Partly, but I also meant what I said." He gestured for her to sit. "I have a proposal for you. A real one this time." Her pulse quickened. "What kind of proposal?" Adrian opened a black folder and slid a single page across the table. The letterhead gleamed in silver. "Cole Industries. Confidential agreement. I need someone to play a role," he said quietly. "My company's board meeting is next week, and my shareholders expect to see me with a fiancé. It is complicated." Lila stared at the document. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé? For a limited time," he clarified. 30 days. I will pay you generously, enough to settle your debts and give you a fresh start. There will be rules, clear, professional, and binding. You will attend 5 social events with me, maintain discretion, and avoid personal entanglements." Her breath caught. "Personal entanglements?" He smiled faintly. "It means no falling in love." The words stung more than she expected. "And what happens when the 30 days are over?" "The contract ends. You walk away free, and I fulfill my obligations." Lila looked down at the paper. Her name already printed on the signature line, waiting. Her rent was overdue, her mother's medical bills unpaid, and her camera still sitting in a pawn shop. It was madness, but so was starving for pride. She reached for the pen. He offered a silver one engraved with his initials and signed. When she finished, Adrian nodded, folding the paper neatly. "Good," he said. "Our arrangement begins tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at 9. You will need wardrobe fittings, etiquette training, and a new phone. Consider it part of the package." Lila leaned back, trying to steady her breath. "You make it sound like a job interview." "In many ways it is," he replied, his tone almost kind. "But unlike most jobs, this one requires trust." He stood, sliding his coat over his shoulders. As he turned to leave, he glanced at her once more, his expression unreadable. "You did well last night, Miss Hart. Let us see if you can do it again when the whole world is watching." In there one. Now they're down and they're one in the plane. In the plane, the bell above the cafe door chimed softly as he disappeared into the cold New York morning, leaving Lila alone with a signed contract, a silver pen, and a heartbeat that would not calm down. For the first time in months, her life had changed direction, but she had no idea whether she was walking toward salvation or straight into a storm. The next morning arrived gray and sharp, the kind of New York cold that seeps into the bones. Lila stood in front of the mirror, unsure whether to feel terrified or foolish. A sleek black car idled outside her apartment building, its windows tinted, its presence impossible to ignore. She tightened her scarf and took one last look around her small studio apartment, peeling wallpaper, a stack of unpaid bills, and the single-framed photograph of her mother smiling beside a hospital bed. 30 days, she whispered to herself. Just 30 days. When she stepped outside, a man in a dark uniform opened the car door without a word. Inside, warmth and leather swallowed her. The scent of cedar reminded her instantly of Adrian Cole. At the Cole residence, a penthouse that stretched above the city like a glass fortress, Lila was greeted by a woman with precise posture and silver hair pulled into a knot. "Miss Hart, I am Evelyn, Mr. Cole's assistant. He asked me to prepare you for the next few weeks." Lila followed her through marble halls lined with abstract art and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline. Everything gleamed, too perfect, too silent. She felt like a stain in a museum. In a spacious dressing room, Evelyn opened a row of garment bags. "Your schedule includes 5 events," she said briskly. A charity gala, a shareholders' dinner, one television appearance, and two family gatherings. You will need to look the part. Lila ran her fingers along a silver gown, smooth as water. They are beautiful, she murmured. They are necessary, Evelyn corrected gently. Mr. Cole's world can be unforgiving. Do not let it swallow you. The next hours blurred into fittings, etiquette coaching, and lessons in posture, diction, and how to hold a champagne flute without trembling. By evening, her reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable. A polished woman with soft curls, flawless makeup, and a gown that caught light like starlight. Yet, behind her eyes, the same uncertainty lingered. At precisely 7 o'clock, Adrian appeared in the doorway. He was dressed in a black suit, every line sharp and deliberate. For a moment he said nothing, only studied her. Then quietly, "You clean up well, Miss Hart." "I am not sure that is a compliment," she replied, managing a small smile. "It is," he said simply, offering his arm. "Shall we?" The charity gala was held in a grand ballroom overlooking the Hudson River. As they stepped out of the car, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted his name, but Adrian kept his expression calm, composed, untouchable. He placed a steady hand at the small of her back. "Smile," he murmured. "They are already guessing." Inside, chandeliers glittered overhead. Guests in designer suits turned to stare. Lila caught snippets of whispers. "Is that his new fiancée? She looks too young." Probably another publicity stunt. Her pulse quickened, but she kept smiling, just as he had instructed. Adrian introduced her to investors and socialites with effortless charm. "This is Lila Hart," he said again and again, his voice never wavering. "My fiancée." Every time he said it, something inside her shifted, as if the lie was becoming too real. Midway through the evening, a woman in a crimson dress approached, her smile sharp as a blade. "Adrian," she purred, touching his arm. "You never told me you were engaged." His jaw tightened slightly. "Vanessa," he said coolly. "It has been a long time." Vanessa's eyes flicked to Lila, assessing. "Cruel." "How?" "Charming. I suppose congratulations are in order. Tell me, Miss Hart, how did you two meet?" "Yes, Dees." Lila hesitated, the lie hovering at her lips, but Adrian stepped in. "At a wedding," he said smoothly. She was sitting alone. "I could not resist." Lila forced a polite laugh, though her cheeks burned. Vanessa smirked, then leaned closer, her perfume cloying. "Be careful, dear. Adrian's fiancés never last long." When she walked away, Lila's throat felt dry. Adrian's hand brushed hers briefly. "Ignore her," he said. "She enjoys testing people." "I noticed," Lila replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Later, as the orchestra began to play, he turned to her and offered his hand again. "Dance with me," he said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. The music swelled, slow and rich. Beneath the golden lights, surrounded by people who judged from afar, Lila felt his heart beat steady against hers. For the first time, she wondered if pretending might not be the hardest part because, somewhere between the cameras and the lies, something dangerously real had begun. The next few weeks moved like a dream Lila could not fully wake from. Each morning began with a knock on her new apartment door inside Adrian's penthouse. Evelyn arriving with a schedule, a new outfit, and the quiet reminder that appearances mattered. Her lessons continued: how to walk beside him without seeming timid, how to answer questions with elegance, how to smile for cameras without showing nerves. Every move she made seemed rehearsed, every breath measured. Yet every time she looked at Adrian, she saw the same unflinching calm that had drawn her in that night at the wedding. At first, he treated her like a colleague, courteous but distant. He called her Miss Hart, kept their interactions brief, and rarely spoke outside business hours. But sometimes, in quiet moments between meetings, she caught him studying her when he thought she was not looking. One morning, Evelyn informed her they would be traveling to the Cole family estate for a weekend charity retreat. "It will be your biggest test yet," Evelyn said as she zipped Lila's suitcase. "His family does not believe in strangers, especially those who marry into wealth. Be prepared." The estate was vast, rolling hills, manicured gardens, and a mansion that looked like it belonged in a history book. As they stepped out of the car, cameras from the local press snapped their photos. Adrian's expression remained unreadable, but his hand found hers briefly, grounding her. "Just breathe," he whispered. "You will be fine." Inside, the air smelled of roses and polished wood. They were greeted by a tall man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. Adrian's uncle, Richard Cole, chairman of the company's board. "So this is your fiancée," he said, his tone heavy with disbelief. "You have always been full of surprises, Adrian." Lila smiled politely. "It is an honor to meet you, sir." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, as though measuring her worth. "Let us hope you are not another headline waiting to happen." Dinner that evening was a parade of questions, disguised as conversation. "Where did you two meet? What does your family do? Do you play any instruments?" Lila answered as calmly as she could, relying on the story they had rehearsed. But when someone asked her about her parents, her throat tightened. "My mother passed away last year," she said softly. "She would have liked this place. She loved gardens." For the first time, the room fell silent. Adrian looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes, a trace of warmth, maybe admiration. He reached under the table and gave her hand a small squeeze. Later that night, she slipped away from the crowd and wandered into the garden. The air was cool, the sky dusted with stars. She thought she was alone until she heard footsteps behind her. "You handled yourself well tonight," Adrian said quietly. She turned to find him standing there. His tie loosened. The sharpness of his business mask slightly faded. "Thank you," she replied. "But I could tell they do not approve of me." He gave a small, weary laugh. "They do not approve of anyone, especially me." Lila tilted her head. "Why?" "The CEO Adrian." Adrian looked out over the garden, his voice low. "Because I built everything they said I could not. My father believed I was too reckless to run this company. My mother stopped speaking to me after I broke off my engagement with Vanessa. I suppose I stopped trying to please them a long time ago." There was a quiet pause, filled only by the rustle of leaves. "That sounds lonely," Lila said softly. "It is," he admitted. Then he looked at her, and for a moment his guard dropped completely. "But tonight, you made it easier." Her heart thudded. She tried to speak, but the words caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. He took a slow step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cold night air. "Do not worry," he said finally, his voice gentle again. "We are almost halfway through our 30 days. Lila smiled faintly, but something inside her sank. Because as much as she wanted to believe it was all pretend, she knew her heart had already stopped keeping count. The following evening brought another test, one that no etiquette lesson could prepare her for. Adrian's company was hosting its annual board dinner at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, a gathering filled with power, politics, and whispered judgment. Lila's name was already floating through the city gossip columns, the mystery fiancée of Adrian Cole. When she arrived, the ballroom shimmered with gold light and the scent of expensive perfume. Every eye seemed to turn toward her as she entered, Adrian's arm steady beneath her hand. She could feel the tension in the room, that subtle current of disbelief. They all knew she was not one of them. "Smile," Adrian murmured softly. "Remember, confidence is half the armor." She smiled, though her pulse pounded in her ears. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. They made polite conversation, endured introductions, and posed for photographs that would no doubt appear in tomorrow's papers. Then came the test. An investor named Mr. Latham, a tall, red-faced man with a diamond watch and too much wine in his glass, leaned across the table toward Lila. "So, Miss Hart," he slurred, "tell us, how does a lovely young woman like you win the heart of one of the city's most powerful men?" Surely it was not just luck. Lila froze, unsure how to respond. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could intervene, Latham continued, his voice dripping with mock amusement. "Do not be shy, dear. Was it your charm or your ambition that did the trick?" A few people laughed under their breath. Lila's cheeks burned, but then she took a slow sip of water, steadying herself. She looked directly at Latham, her voice calm and clear. "Neither, Mr. Latham. It was honesty. Something money cannot buy." The table went quiet. Latham's smirk faltered, and Adrian's eyes flicked toward her, surprised but faintly proud. "Touché," one of the other board members muttered with a laugh, breaking the silence. Adrian leaned closer and whispered, "Well played." After dinner, as the orchestra began to play, Adrian led her to the center of the ballroom for a dance. "You handled that perfectly," he said quietly. "I only told the truth," Lila replied. "People like him expect you to apologize for existing." His expression softened. You do not owe anyone an apology, Miss Hart, least of all me. They moved in slow rhythm under the chandeliers, and for a brief moment, the world around them disappeared. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, and she could feel his heartbeat steady beneath her hand. The lights dimmed slightly, casting everything in a soft amber glow. Across the room, she noticed Vanessa watching from the bar, a glass of champagne in hand, her smile cold and knowing. When their eyes met, Vanessa raised her glass in mock salute before turning away. A chill ran down Lila's spine, but she forced herself to focus on Adrian. Do you ever get tired of pretending? She asked quietly. He looked down at her, a faint, unreadable smile on his lips. Every day, he said, but sometimes pretending is the only way to survive in this world. Lila wanted to ask what he meant, but the song ended. Applause echoed around them, pulling them back to the reality of polished floors and staring eyes. Later that night, back in the limousine, Lila gazed out the window at the city lights rushing past. Adrian was silent beside her, his expression thoughtful. About earlier, she said softly. Thank you for standing by me. He turned to her, his tone sincere. You stood up for yourself. You did not need me to save you. She smiled faintly, then looked down at her lap. Her fingers brushed against the silver pen she still carried in her purse, the same one she had signed the contract with. For reasons she could not explain, she had kept it close every day since. Adrian noticed. You still have that, he said quietly. It reminds me this is still a business arrangement, she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. He nodded once, then looked away, his jaw tightening. Yes, he said finally. It is. But as the car rolled through the quiet Manhattan streets, neither of them believed that anymore. What had begun as a performance was starting to feel dangerously real, and both of them knew that once the line between fake and true was crossed, there would be no going back. Days turned into weeks, and the contract that once felt like armor now hung over Lila's heart like a weight. The line between what was real and what was performance had begun to blur. Every morning started with meetings, rehearsals, and polite smiles for photographers. Every evening ended with quiet drives home, the city's lights flickering across Adrian's face as he stared out the window, saying little. Lila had learned his silences now what they meant, what they hid. Beneath the polished calm was a man who lived by control, yet seemed to be losing it piece by piece around her. One night, after another exhausting event, Adrian suggested a drive instead of heading straight home. The city had just begun to thaw from winter. Rain had washed the streets clean, and the sky glowed faintly gold from the lights below. There is somewhere I want to show you, he said as the driver turned down a quiet road along the river. They stopped at an empty overlook where the skyline stretched endless against the dark water. Adrian stepped out first, his breath visible in the cool air. This is where I come when I need to remember who I was before all this, he said softly. Lila followed, folding her arms against the chill. And who were you? He gave a short laugh, the kind that carried a trace of pain. A kid with $100 dream and a second-hand suit. I built everything I have because I was tired of being invisible. But somewhere along the way, I think I started disappearing again behind numbers, behind headlines, behind the person people think I am. She watched him quietly. The wind brushed her hair across her face, and he reached out without thinking, tucking a loose strand behind her ear. His hand lingered for a second too long. You do not have to be perfect all the time, she said gently. People would still respect you. Los lumens, sin versi hab sex. He looked at her, his eyes tired but warm. Respect is not love, Lila. I am beginning to see the difference. Her heart caught in her throat. They stood there in silence, the world narrowing to the space between them. Then Adrian stepped back slightly, as though realizing what he had just said. We should head back, he murmured. It is late. The drive home was quiet. But that night, neither of them slept. The next morning, the mood in the penthouse was different. Lila found Adrian in the study, a file open on his desk. You are up early, she said lightly, trying to sound casual. He did not look up. The board is preparing a merger. It is risky, but I need to show them I can manage it. She hesitated. And what about us? What happens when the 30 days end? He finally met her gaze. Do you want it to end? Her breath caught. That is not what I said. He stood, closing the file, walking toward her until there were only inches between them. Then tell me what you want. The air felt heavy, charged. She could smell his cologne, cedar and rain, and the warmth of his voice sent a shiver down her spine. "I do not know," she whispered. "Everything about this feels like pretending, except when I am with you." Adrian exhaled slowly, as if those words had struck something deep. "Lila," he said softly, almost warning himself, "do not make this harder than it already is." The rundalazy. But then, before either of them could speak again, Evelyn appeared at the doorway, her face pale. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "there is something you need to see." She handed him a tablet. On the screen flashed headlines, photographs from the gala, accompanied by bold, brutal words. Inside, Adrian Cole's contract marriage scandal. Sources claim fiancé is a paid actress. Lila froze. The color drained from her face. Adrian's jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he set the tablet down. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her, eyes dark. "Vanessa," he said grimly. "She must have found out. She wants to ruin both of us. It is miles, 7 to did mataroundable. It's apologious." Outside the window, the city hummed with indifferent light. Inside, silence stretched thick and suffocating. The fairy tale they had built from lies was cracking, and for the first time, Lila was not sure if their hearts would survive what came next. By the next morning, the headlines had spread everywhere. Every news site, every gossip column, every business outlet carried the same story: the billionaire's fake fiancé. Lila could barely bring herself to look at her phone. Her social media was flooded with hateful comments and wild rumors. Strangers dissected her life as if she were a character in a scandal they owned. Some called her a gold digger. Others said she was part of a publicity stunt. No one cared that none of it was true. When she stepped into the living room, Adrian was already there, pacing by the window. His tie hung loose, his hair disheveled, the picture of a man who had not slept. "I am handling it," he said without turning around. "Handling it?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "The entire city thinks I sold myself for your name, Adrian. How is that something you can just handle?" He turned sharply, frustration flashing in his eyes. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I would risk everything I built just to be humiliated in public?" Lila stared at him, tears stinging her eyes. "You promised me this was safe, that it was just an arrangement. You said no one would ever find out." "I said I would protect you," he said quietly, "and I still will." But the words felt hollow. She could see it in his face, the panic, the calculations running behind his calm exterior. This was more than bad press. This was a threat to his empire. The doorbell rang. Evelyn stepped in, holding a folder. "The board is demanding an emergency meeting," she said grimly. "They want answers about the so-called contract and whether the engagement was used to manipulate shareholders." Adrian's expression hardened. "Tell them I will be there." As Evelyn left, Lila turned to him. "They will blame me." "They will not," he said firmly. "You do not know that." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Then, softly, she added, "Maybe it is better if I leave." Adrian looked up sharply. "No, that will make it worse. They will think you ran because it was true." "Maybe it is not about what they think," she whispered. "Maybe it is about me being able to breathe again." He stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. "Lila, please, trust me one more time." She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But something inside her had cracked. The man who had once felt like safety now looked like another cage. That evening, while Adrian faced the board, Lila packed her things in silence. The dress she had worn at the gala, the shoes she had borrowed, the jewelry still tagged with prices she could never afford, all folded neatly into the box Evelyn had given her weeks ago. On top, she placed the silver pen. When Adrian returned, the penthouse was quiet. He saw the box by the door before he saw her. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough. "I am ending the contract," she said softly. "Before it ends me." He took a step forward, but she shook her head. "Do not, Adrian. I cannot keep pretending. I cannot live a lie for your company while my name burns out there. And it is say shall de guess the contel bears." He stared at her, his jaw tightening. "You are walking away when it gets difficult?" "No," she replied. "I am walking away before it destroys what little I have left." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. She turned toward the door, pausing only once. "You were right that first night. Pretending can save you for a while. but it cannot save your heart. And with that, she left her footsteps echoing through the marble hall until the elevator doors closed behind her. Adrian stood motionless in the silence she left behind. For the first time in years, the man who could fix everything had no idea how to fix himself. Outside, rain began to fall against the city windows, soft, relentless, and indifferent, washing away the lights that once made everything look perfect. Days passed, and New York kept moving as if nothing had happened. But for Adrian, time had stopped the moment Lila walked out of his life. He buried himself in meetings, press statements, and endless damage control. The board meeting had been brutal. Shareholders demanded accountability, investors threatened withdrawal, and Vanessa's smug smile from across the table had nearly pushed him over the edge. He fought back, presenting evidence, dismissing rumors, and refusing to let them destroy the company he had built. But none of it mattered. The emptiness followed him everywhere, into the boardroom, into the car, and into the silence of his penthouse that still smelled faintly like her perfume. Evelyn noticed. "You cannot keep going like this," she said one morning, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "You look like you have not slept in days." "I am fine," Adrian muttered. "No, you are not," she said softly. "You lost her, and you hate yourself for it. Do something about that before you lose yourself too." That evening, Adrian sat alone in his office long after everyone had gone home. On his desk lay the silver pen Lila had left behind. He picked it up, rolling it between his fingers, remembering her signature on the contract, the start of everything and the end of it too. He opened his laptop and typed an email. Then he deleted it. He tried again, deleted it again. Words were useless now. What he needed to do could not be written. It had to be seen. 3 days later, Lila stood behind a small display at a downtown community gallery, helping hang photographs for a charity exhibit. It was her first real job since everything collapsed, and though the pay was small, it felt honest. She had taken the picture on her phone when she first moved out streets after rain, reflections of city lights on puddles, and someone at the gallery had loved it. She was tightening a frame when a familiar voice echoed behind her. "Your work deserves a bigger wall." Her hand froze. She turned slowly. Adrian stood there in a dark coat, rain still glistening on his shoulders. He looked different, tired, maybe humbled, but his eyes held that same steady warmth. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. He took a deep breath. "Making things right." Before she could speak, he gestured to the far end of the gallery. A crowd was gathering near a covered display. A reporter, a few photographers, and the gallery owner waited expectantly. Adrian gave a nod, and one of the staff pulled away the white cloth. Behind it hung a large photograph, her photograph blown up and beautifully framed. Beneath it, engraved in silver, were the words, "The Art of Lila Hart, in partnership with the Cole Foundation." Her breath caught. "Adrian, what is this?" "It is yours," he said. "Your work, your name. I told the world who you really are and who I really am. No contracts, no lies, just truth." Tears stung her eyes. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did," he said softly, "because I was the one pretending. I told myself love was a weakness, that I could control everything, even my heart. But then you walked in, and suddenly, nothing made sense anymore." The reporters started snapping pictures, but Adrian ignored them. He reached into his pocket and held out the silver pen. "You left this behind," he said. "I thought it was a symbol of our deal. Turns out, it is the only thing that ever felt real. I want you to sign one more thing, no contract, just an agreement between two people who finally stopped lying to themselves." Her lips trembled as she took the pen. "And what does it say?" "That you stay," he said simply. For a long moment she just looked at him, this man who once seemed untouchable, now standing open and raw in front of her. Then she smiled through her tears. "I think I can sign that." The cameras flashed, the crowd applauded, but Adrian saw only her. Somewhere behind them, Evelyn whispered to a reporter, "That, right there, is what redemption looks like." And for the first time since everything fell apart, Adrian Cole felt free, not because the scandal was over, but because he had finally chosen truth over pride and love over fear. 3 months later, the city was in bloom again. Spring sunlight poured across the skyline, soft and golden, painting the glass towers in warm reflections. The scandal had long faded, replaced by newer headlines and fresher gossip, But for Adrian and Lila, life had taken a quieter shape, one built not on contracts or appearances, but on something simple and true. The gallery partnership had grown faster than either of them expected. Lila's photographs, candid captures of city life, small moments of grace among chaos, had become a sensation. People came not because she was the billionaire's fiancée, but because her art made them feel something real. She finally had her own studio, sunlight streaming through tall windows, prints drying on wires overhead. Adrian visited often, though never unannounced. He would bring coffee, lean against the doorframe, and watch her work with the kind of peace that had once been foreign to him. Sometimes he stayed in silence. Other times he asked her opinion on projects for the Cole Foundation, funding schools, restoring parks, helping young artists like her. He had stepped away from the cold politics of the boardroom and into something more human. One afternoon, she found him setting up a small bouquet on her desk. "You did not have to," she said, smiling. "I wanted to," he replied. "You spent months bringing color into other people's worlds. I thought maybe it was time someone brought some into yours." Lila laughed softly. "You are learning how to be sentimental, Mr. Cole." "I am learning from the best," he said. Their eyes met, and for a moment, nothing else existed. The same quiet energy that had filled the space between them at that wedding months ago returned, only this time there was no pretending. Later that week, Adrian invited her to the rooftop of the same hotel where they had first met. The evening air was warm, carrying the scent of lilacs from the terrace garden. The city glowed beneath them, endless and alive. Lila stepped out onto the deck, her hair lifting in the breeze. "This place feels different now," she said. "It should," Adrian replied, turning toward her. "Last time we were here, I asked you to pretend. Tonight I am asking you for something real." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple diamond ring, elegant, timeless, not loud like the world they had left behind. "Lila Hart," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "No contracts this time. No rules, no pretending. Just two people who found each other by accident and decided to stay. Will you marry me for real?" Lila's eyes shimmered. For a second she could not speak. Then she nodded, laughing through tears. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Applause broke out behind them. Evelyn, the gallery staff, and a few close friends who had quietly gathered, smiling as the city lights flickered above. As they kissed, the wind carried laughter across the rooftop. Below, New York shimmered like a sea of stars. Later, while everyone toasted with champagne, Lila looked out over the city and spoke softly, almost to herself. "You know, I used to think my life would always be ordinary. But maybe the extraordinary things only happen when we stop pretending." Adrian slipped his arm around her shoulders. "You were never ordinary," he said. "You just needed someone to see it." She smiled, resting her head against him. The world that had once laughed at her now applauded her name. But in that moment, all that mattered was the man beside her, the warmth of his hand and the quiet truth between them. Because this time, it was not about saving face or keeping up appearances or writing a contract. This was love, imperfect, unpredictable, and finally, beautifully real. And for Adrian and Lila, that was the only agreement that would last forever.